Emerging products. I want to introduce my colleague, Senator Tom Berryhill, and we expect others, we hope shortly, from the subcommittee as well as from, everyone has been invited from both the Assembly and the Senate. A few housekeeping details. There are lots of handouts and the agenda and a few other things you might be interested in up at the front, right here. And that the hearing today is being televised on the Senate Capitol channel. It's available live on the Cal Channel webcast. So there will be a record of this, and there will be DVDs and transcribed copies of the hearings that will be available to anyone here or who's listening to this elsewhere. Our committee consultant is Susan Boyd, so if you want to request a copy, those of you that are here or those of you that hear my voice, please contact her through the committee. And I'm very pleased that we have a full house, frankly, here today. That's great. So many of you have taken the time to be here. I want to, first of all, thank all the presenters ahead of time. Many have traveled from not only elsewhere in the state, even across the causeway, but from plenty of places throughout the state, throughout the country, and frankly, even the world. So let's begin. I'd like to make a few introductory remarks, and then we have three panels, and there will be ample time for questions and comments from our members, and I hope to have a really good discussion about the challenges that are facing the new and burgeoning olive oil industry. Let me just begin by saying that California has a long history of support for new agricultural industries as they develop. CDFA, California Department of Food and Ag, was formed 100 years ago, and one of its main charges was to adapt public policy to changing industries, to the changing agricultural industry. And it's had a history of that. It's been very much involved with marketing and education and standards and a number of things that have led to what is a tremendously, frankly, successful agricultural industry. So olive oil, which has been growing rapidly over the past few years, is moving right into that area. The acreage, since last year, the acreage that has been planted in olive trees has doubled from just 3 years ago. There are 400, we think, and probably more, growers and producers at this time, and there are over 50 varieties of tree, of olive oil. The olive oil industry is expanding, and not surprisingly so. It's a result of what we have here in California. It's an ideal climate and rich soil, and we have super high density techniques for planting and harvesting. The olive oil tree requires very little water, which, as we all know, and I wear a different hat on that, is at a premium in our state. So it just fits right in. It's a great industry, provides a very heart-healthy product. We also have the development at UC Davis of an olive center, and we'll hear from its director shortly. So my colleagues and I look forward to working with the industry, with the growers, the producers, and the consumers to hear the challenges that you face and to help put together solutions that will ensure a sustainable industry, a healthy industry that can compete not only throughout the country but throughout the world. So I'd like to invite my colleague, Senator Tom Berryhill, to make any comments you'd like.
Sure, and thank you, Madam Chairman, for inviting me in the first place to be a part of this committee. The olive oil industry is emerging as a dynamic industry, and it quite frankly doesn't surprise me that we have a full house here today. This is an industry that reminds me, I'm a grape grower, and this reminds me very much of maybe the early stages of the grape growing phenomenon, when everything was happening very quickly. There was quality issues, there was many different individuals in different regions and different appellations that had concerns about their quality and better quality in one area as another. I think we have a fantastic opportunity here today to start a conversation on how to best manage this industry as we move forward. And I'm looking forward to hearing from a number of folks that are experts and growers in this industry, Lois, and hopefully we're going to have a series of hearings that we can come up with something that makes some sense for everybody, that makes everybody somewhat happy. I mean, and most times when we come up to a final consensus, it may not be perfect, but what we're doing here today is starting the process of trying to come up with something that makes some sense for everybody. So welcome everybody that's here. We're glad you're here, and we're looking very forward to listen to the folks today.
Thanks, Tom. Can I have the first panel come forward? And as you do, I will introduce you briefly. Although you probably need no introduction in this room, I'd like to welcome Senator LaMalfa, who is a member of the subcommittee. Welcome. Welcome, Dan. Welcome, Tom. First of all, Dan Flynn, our first speaker, is Executive Director of the UC Davis Olive Center, which was established in 2008 and is the only one of its kind in North America. The center's core assets are the 30 expert faculty members, the extension specialists, and the farm advisors who provide an interdisciplinary resource for olive growers and processors. And Dan Flynn has been an excellent advisor to this subcommittee and to me and to the chair of the Agricultural Committee, Senator Cannella, on the two pieces of legislation that we were able to pass, one that had to do with standards and the second as to the rootstock quality. So, Dan, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the subcommittee. The Sergeant has passed out a couple of reports that UC Davis has completed over the last couple of years, so I will refer to those in my very brief remarks here. First, I just want to let you know what the Olive Center does at UC Davis. We have been around for about 4 years, and our goal is to do for olive oil and table olives what UC Davis did for wine. And we do that through our own self-funded efforts. We actually don't receive public funding for any of our operational costs. Entrepreneurial efforts that include selling olive oil at the bookstore, putting on seminars, bringing in research, those kinds of things. And even though as a land-grant university, UC Davis is primarily concerned about California agriculture, we're also a global institution, and the spread of UC Davis influence goes across the globe, and there's plenty of graduates from UC Davis in various places around the world. The topic of the hearing today on challenges facing the California olive oil industry they're issues that actually also have a global reach, and I'd like to identify two of the main issues before passing it on to Tom Muller. The two primary issues that I believe we can talk about today deal with quality, number one, and authenticity, number two. And there's all different kinds of olive oil grades out there. Rather than trying to explain all those, it really could be very simply laid out when it comes to quality. The first issue, if you think of a line between extra virgin, which we all know is the top quality oil, and everything else below the line, what the line represents is defects, flavor defects. That's one of the main criteria in the international standard. And the flavor defects can be things like rancidity. There's descriptors such as musty or fusty or winey. And these are all essentially bad flavors that can occur in olive oil for various reasons. Extra virgin is supposed to not have any of those bad flavors. So from a quality standpoint, extra virgin, zero defects. What we've done at UC Davis is a couple of studies on looking at this issue of quality. And what we found in the course of going to supermarkets around the state over the course of more than a year was that this very simple measure of quality is not adhered to in most cases with imported olive oil that's labeled as extra virgin. And so I will just discuss, and these reports have been passed out, I'll just refer to this green report, the one with the green cover, which we released in April, which took 134 samples of olive oil from off the shelf in California, in the Sacramento, in the Bay Area, and the LA markets. And we took the top 5 imported branded oils. We also took the top-selling California branded oil, the top-selling Australian branded oil, and the top-selling, what I would call a premium Italian oil that was priced at a premium level and is solely from Italy. And we subjected those oils to a number of chemical tests, as well as this basic sensory test that I described of the line between extra virgin and everything else being non-defective. And what we found was that 73% of the imported branded oils did not meet this very minimal standard of quality, meaning that 73% of the top 5 branded olive oils sold in California that we selected at random from supermarket shelves did not meet what was described on the label as extra virgin. And as I mentioned, the defects can include rancidity, musty, fusty, etc. We found that the California oils did much better, the Australian oils did much better. Not that these oils were perfect in every respect, and I think it's a marker of the fragility and perishability of olive oil that even with those oils, when you have an oil that comes from California, you can have situations where the oil goes below a standard. And it's something that I think the quality producers everywhere are interested in trying to make sure that the best possible quality ultimately is delivered to the consumer. So the reaction we got to that study was one of questioning UC Davis's credentials, and this is an oil or a study that was conducted with funding from the California olive oil industry. So that was a criticism, is that we were just sort of supporting the home team here. But what we found actually isn't any different from what Consumer Reports found in 2004 when they found a number of the top labeled olive oils sold in the United States were defective. It's no different from what they found in Germany and Canada, in Australia, in Uruguay, and even by the Department of Health in Andalusia in Spain, and this is the largest area of olive oil production in the world, where in Spain, just to put it in perspective, there's 6 million acres of olives in Spain. And even in the top area for production in the world, the Department of Health found quality problems with olive oil sold in the stores. So that's the first issue, quality. And then the second issue is different, and that deals with authenticity. And so we're not talking about whether olive oil meets a grade standard. We're talking about whether something sold as olive oil is actually made from olives. And this is something that Tom's book addressed, and his earlier article in the New Yorker addressed. And it's not an issue that we've studied as of yet, but drawing from the work that Tom has done and the interviews that he has done, he has found that when the federal government used to pull olive oil off the shelf to test for its authenticity, from the 1930s through the 1990s, every single decade, they found that there was adulterated oil that was labeled as olive oil. It could have been from cheaper seed oil, soy, cottonseed, whatever. And the FDA found that even in the 1980s, up to 50% of the oils that they tested was adulterated. So there's been no recent studies. The FDA has sort of put this on a lower priority in the era of bioterrorism, E. coli, and salmonella. But the insiders that I've talked to who know this area well, and I think even you'll hear later from the North American Olive Oil Association, which has done their own testing, that they found that there is quite a bit of adulteration still occurring in olive oil, and particularly in the food service arena, where price is of paramount concern to high-volume food service providers. That as that price goes below a certain threshold, the authenticity of that oil becomes more questionable. So, in closing, let me just say that the legislature, with the bill that you authored last session, Madam Chair, has identified these lines very clearly on quality and authenticity. On quality, it's whether extra virgin olive oil is defective or not. It shouldn't be. That's the line separating extra virgin from everything else. On authenticity, the line is whether that olive oil is actually made from olives. And that's in California law right now. So the question really isn't where is the line drawn. The question is who's enforcing the line and who's holding the line.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. What I think I'll do is we'll hear from the entire panel and then delve into questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Thank you. Tom Mueller, welcome. Welcome. We're very glad to see you. He is an American writer and freelance journalist, and he's contributed to The New Yorker, National Geographic, The New York Times, The Atlantic Monthly, and other publications. And in 2007, in The New Yorker, he wrote an article called Slippery Business, The Trade in Adulterated Olive Oil. It drew attention to the distortions inherent in the olive oil business, as well as the admirable and wonderful qualities of fine oil. And he's just written a book that I'm sure he'll tell us about called Extra Virginity, which explores the olive oil culture through the centuries and beyond. He currently lives in Italy and holds a BA from Harvard and a doctorate from Oxford, where he was a Rhodes Scholar. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Wolk, and thank you, Mrs. Boyd, for arranging this hearing, and Senators Berryhill and Lamalfa for being here today. I hope some of your colleagues arrive presently. As Senator Wolk has said, I'm a freelance writer, and I'm based in Italy. At this time, I've been living in countries around the Mediterranean for the last 20 years. And after my 2007 article in The New Yorker about the international olive oil trade, slippery business, I devoted a substantial amount of my time to learning more about this rich substance. And since then have written a book, as Senator Wolk has mentioned, Extra Virginity, which was published last month, December 2011. And while writing this book, I traveled extensively through the major olive oil production areas around the Mediterranean, as well as in the Middle East, North Africa, Australia, and elsewhere, forming or beginning to form a global view of the olive oil industry. To write the final chapter of my book, I spent a month in California and have returned here twice since then. And I've had the privilege to spend time with a number of California olive growers, millers, oil traders, and importers, some of whom I'm glad to see again in this room today. During my research and writing on olive oil in California and throughout the world, I've encountered again and again a strange paradox in olive oil. Olive oil is an extremely healthful, delicious, and high-value food, a substance considered sacred by many religions. And yet, the olive oil trade is plagued by dubious dealings and downright fraud. As I discovered while writing my book, the positive characteristics of true extra virgin olive oil are many. Extra virgin olive oil is the healthy and nutritious center point of the Mediterranean diet, and medical research is beginning to demonstrate its effectiveness against a range of pathologies including coronary heart disease, stroke, certain cancers, even neurological disorders like Alzheimer's disease. And it's no wonder that olive trees and oil are considered sacred by many religions. As a center point of most Mediterranean cuisines, olive oil also has enormous culinary potential. Here in California, top chefs and instructors at the Culinary Institute of America in Napa, the world's largest cooking school, describe premium olive oil as the next culinary frontier. Olive oil also has great business potential right now in America, which recently replaced Greece as the third largest consumer country in the world in olive oil. The U.S. oil market is valued at about $1.5 billion with 10% growth per year. California, with its Mediterranean climate and agricultural know-how, is ideally suited to growing olives and to supplying the demand for this oil. Olives and olive oil should be the next home run crop for California agriculture. Yet here is the paradox that I mentioned earlier. Despite these marvelous qualities of olive oil and despite this apparently rosy economic picture, consumers are being deprived of good oil, and honest producers are consistently unable to earn a living because of distortions in the olive oil industry and because of outright fraud. Although USDA and international regulations provide crystal clear definitions of extra virgin olive oil, a number of different products, some very good, some very bad, are being sold as extra virgin olive oil in America today. True extra virgin olive oil is the fresh squeezed juice of the olive fruit. It is expensive to make. You need high quality fruit. You need to pick it and crush it quickly, store it properly in temperature controlled conditions. But much olive oil sold in supermarkets is substandard oil made from low grade, spoiled olives, which is cheap to produce and is sold as extra virgin at low prices that consistently undercut honest producers. Systematic testing by the UC Davis Olive Center, but also, as Dan Flynn has mentioned, by Australia's consumer protection magazine Choice, by the regional government of Andalusia in Spain, by the food magazine Der Feinschmecker in Germany, and by other organizations, all underscore that a high percentage of olive oil sold as extra virgin do not make this grade. Many of these oils are actually lampante, or lamp oil, which by law cannot be sold as food, but only as fuel. Many olive oils, particularly in food service, aren't even made from olives at all. They are soybean, sunflower, and other low-quality vegetable oils, colored green with chlorophyll and doctored with flavorants, then sold as extra virgin olive oil. During the reporting for my book, I have met with undercover military police in Italy who describe widespread criminal networks involved in the production and distribution of fake extra virgin olive oil. I've traced the routes of tanker ships that meandered around the Mediterranean and the North Sea, picking up 3,000-ton lots of crude vegetable oil that miraculously transformed themselves, at least on the ship's documents, into olive oil before their delivery to South Italian ports. And these oils were subsequently purchased and resold to consumers by multinational food corporations. The result of this kind of activity is massive quantities of substandard oil sold at bargain basement prices as extra virgin, which defraud consumers and undercut honest producers. And this is by no means just a foreign problem. In fact, some of the most flagrant examples of olive oil fraud I've ever encountered occur right here in the United States, right here in California. In my book, I name a number of offenders, and I'd like to read one passage from the book to give a sense of the severity of the problem, even here in this state. This passage regards Italcal, a Los Angeles-based olive oil company. A former employee of Italcal, who is currently in dispute with the company, reports having observed extensive adulteration by the company. He claims that Italcal systematically lied about the nature and origins of the oil it sold and ignored traceability and other procedures required by the FDA. He speaks of a worker in the Italcal warehouse whom he nicknamed the gondolier, who he says blended up adulterated oils using a 5-foot metal paddle, adding a coloring agent procured by the head of the company, Emilio Viscomi. Viscomi kept the recipe for the agent a closely guarded secret. You want it greener, less green, the former employee said. You want it emerald green? However you want it, that's how he makes it. The employee also describes Italcal's illustrious client list, which he says included some of the leading food distribution companies in America, whom he claims must have known the true nature of the olive oil they were buying, given that it was being sold at far below the market price of olive oil. I find this situation outrageous. Clear laws exist on olive oil quality, adulteration, false advertising, food labeling, and so forth. But nobody is enforcing these laws. Not the FDA, not the state health departments, not one district attorney, nobody. Because of this river of cheap counterfeit oil, consumers are deprived of the health benefits they expect when they buy what they think is extra virgin olive oil, and in some cases may be eating products that harm their health. Because of this river of cheap counterfeit oil, honest growers, oil producers, and importers can't make a living, since they're consistently undercut by low-cost, substandard products. Add to this situation the fact that many of the false extra virgins imported from the Mediterranean enjoy a $6 a gallon government subsidy and other economic aids from the EU, which mean they cost even less, and it is extremely hard for California growers and oil makers to survive economically. The lack of a level playing field sometimes takes a heavy personal toll. In 2 cases I've encountered in California, it has driven an olive farmer into bankruptcy and severe depression. One of these cases ended in suicide, when the farmer hung himself from the limb of one of his olive trees. This situation will only get worse in the future, unless decisive action is taken. We are reaching a crisis point in olive oil in America, and in California olive oil in particular. I urge everyone in this room who is in a position to act to move quickly and decisively to enforce existing laws on olive oil quality and food safety, and to tighten these laws in the future, in defense of producers here in California and of consumers throughout America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Are there questions for anyone on this first panel, or comments?
How are we doing on time?
We're doing pretty good.
Just
We just started. We're doing fine.
Yeah, just briefly, I read your New Yorker, and 10,000 tons of Turkish hazelnut and Argentinian sunflower seed oil to Regoglio ended up as olive oil. How big is this common practice, and is that part of the 75% problem that we've got coming through, Tom, or what?
It was a bigger problem back when olive oil was a more valuable substance. The progressive doubt that has been injected into the market and the progressive slide in quality and increase in production have driven down market prices for olive oil to the point where right now on the open market in Spain you can get a kilo or about a liter of olive oil for €1.80. You can't walk out the door for €1.80 to make real extra virgin olive oil, and that olive oil is graded extra virgin. So there's a progressive dumbing down of the quality of the product, which has led to a slide in prices that at this point I wouldn't be surprised if they were adulterating hazelnut oil with olive oil.
But that's happening over in Europe.
And it's coming here.
But it's coming here, but it's happening in Europe.
Right.
So again, it begs the question, who enforces all this stuff? And you would think it'd be the USDA, but they're not.
No. FDA has said quite frankly, and one can sympathize with their predicament. They have an increasingly long list of items to deal with and an increasingly short budget. And they simply say we will not be able to look after olive oil for the foreseeable future. Now, I'm not sure that might change, but I don't expect it to.
It's obviously a problem. Dan, you mentioned that 73% of the oils, now are these foreign oils or are these domestic oils too, don't meet quality standards?
It was Senator Berryhill. It was 73% of the top 5 branded imported olive oils labeled as extra virgin.
So we obviously have a problem with olive oils coming across the ocean.
One thing I didn't mention is that in the U.S. we consume total maybe about 75 million gallons, and roughly 98 to 99% of that is imported because the California industry, just getting started, can only satisfy about 1 to 2% of that consumption. So it's primarily an imported market here in the U.S., the largest imported market in the world, actually, for olive oil.
This is a very quickly growing olive oil industry that we've got here in California. So the point of all this is we want to protect our guys as we move forward.
Senator Berryhill, I'd like to add that while it is a problem in imported oil, it's also a real problem in homegrown or at least home mixed oil. It's by no means just a foreign problem.
Great. Thank you.
Senator Malfa?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation on this. I've got a long time background around olives and olive oil myself. With my last name, Lamalfa, he kind of goes with it. My grandfather used to buy cases of it from the Oroville factory that was in Thermalito for a lot of years, Oleo de Oro, and give it away to all the family and stuff, cook with it. It was everywhere. So we love the stuff, but it's fascinating to me that I've heard other stats in the past that most people are buying and using olive oil, not produced around here, but in general, just average off the store stuff that would qualify as rancid. So people in this country don't even really know what olive oil tastes like unless they've had the chance to try some of our nice products that are set up at booths and fairs and cattleman's dinner the other night and all this. And so what do you see as the way to break out of this? And we need stronger enforcement, I know, but what's going to shake people into doing the right thing on this? Are the fines way too small right now? I know Senator Wolk took a step last year with last year's legislation and getting this defined and all, but what do we need to do to really wake them up when somebody does get caught mislabeling extra virgin or one of the lesser grades? What would take it to shake up this the bad actors in this?
Well, I think certainly steeper fines and simply one prosecution. Frankly, that has not happened to my knowledge to
Not
date.
one prosecution in the U.S. on this?
Well, in the U.S., no. In recent time, there have been a couple in the last 15 years, but it's been almost laughable. I'm not aware of one prosecution in California. There may have been one, but I'm not aware of a major case. And I think that would send a shockwave, quite frankly, through the industry. Because as we've said, it's not merely someone mixing up oils with a metal paddle in some warehouse in Los Angeles. It's the people he sells to, which are some of the major food distribution companies in America, who then sell it on to hospitals, schools, nursing homes, and so forth.
They're demanding it, and somewhere they know what they're getting, right?
I think so. I think it's safe to say these people are very good business people, and they know what the market price of real extra virgin olive oil would be, and they're willing to, for the purposes of low cost, willing to turn a blind eye.
What's the percentage of just average oil on the shelf in a regular supermarket that might fall into the rancid category?
Well, I think, I'm not familiar with the exact percentages of the UC Davis study, but
Well, that 73% that we've been talking about was relating to that sensory defect that I described at the beginning. One of the most common sensory defect is rancidity. Another common defect is something called fusty, which is a flavor that you get when olives are allowed to stay piled up before processing, where they start to rot and ferment. And then you get not a very good flavor from that. I don't know what it's like in wine if you can do that and you get away with it, but with olive oil it gives a defect to the oil. So rancidity was the most common one that we found.
What are the degrees? What's the highest as far as bad quality or even unhealthy? Is rancid the worst or fusty the worst? Or
I don't know if there's been much scientific research done on the negative health impacts of these defects.
Taste or health or just general?
Yeah, they all
do I
have.
want rancid or do I want fusty if I have to have one of the other?
Well, usually you'll get both.
Okay.
But
There was winey in there somewhere.
Winey vinegar.
Winey is a defect as well.
Vinegar and wine.
These terms all sound like if we wake everybody up too early on Saturday morning around these all come up.
I think it's important, though, to remember that these aren't just matters of food snobbery. They were established by the International Olive Council and espoused by the USDA and others, because these odd flavors and odors map directly to the chemical composition of this olive oil and directly indicate the quality, health-giving properties, and flavor of that oil. So it's not just a matter of saying I don't like winey and fusty, but really how fresh is this fruit juice that we're eating?
Now, is this something that the state needs to take up at its level, or can this be processed by a local district attorney when you bring this up? What can you tell us on that? Because
maybe even federal.
Yeah. what's the appropriate level, or where would we get the attention of this, you think?
Anywhere will be dealt with, I think, is the appropriate answer. So far, there has been little traction on all levels, but anecdotally, I believe that all three of those levels are appropriate avenues to approach this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We know that from our background material that we shared, that there are some states that have acted in the enforcement area, Connecticut being one of them, their Department of Consumer Protection. So I think as we move forward, I think both New York and New Jersey also have had more active efforts. In Connecticut, they ordered the food inspectors to test the product. So, and there was a great deal of publication, publicity about that. So, and probably of the result as well. So, it seems to me that might be something we might want to take a look at with respect to California. I have a question about the health impacts, and you didn't focus a lot on that, although you did mention it. It would be helpful to have a fair amount of good research as we move along with supporting the industry with respect to health impacts. We know that it makes a difference, but we need more, it seems to me. And we're very well positioned, it seems to me, with UC Davis, which has a school of nutritional biology and food science and technology, and a medical school and a vet school. I mean, it seems to me that they should be interested in partnering, seems to me, with the Olive Center on doing some of this research. What do you think about that, and whether has there been any effort to do that? Do you think that's an area perhaps the subcommittee could encourage or look into?
I'm sorry, Senator. Yes, I think that would be a great, if the subcommittee could encourage it. We have done some initial exploration of this with the Med Center, and we've had some discussions with their chief of immunology on the health impacts of olive oil. There's quite a bit of interest, and as you know, there's different levels of validity for these kinds of health studies, and the most sort of the gold standard is a clinical trial, which can get pretty expensive. So we've been exploring it, and I think the question is trying to figure out how we could get it funded through the nonprofit foundation, somewhere where we can get some funding for it. I don't get the sense at this time that the California industry, this is a priority for them. I think they're more concerned about some of these quality issues.
And their direction is looking at the marketing order, I believe, for the federal marketing order at the moment. But it seems to me that one of the issues in terms of consumer protection is one of the reasons people are going to olive oil is because of its health benefits. So the consumer's not getting what they pay for, and that's it seems to me a good argument that would encourage enforcement as well, which, yes.
I think, the FDA allows a partial health claim on olive oil bottles, saying eat this because this is good for your heart, but they're not verifying what goes in the bottle. It seems to me that's a fundamental difficulty. I think your question of health is extremely cogent and important in this, and needs to be. I'm not a food scientist. My understanding in the matter of low-grade olive oils that are being passed off as extra virgin, that rancidity implies free radicals, implies peroxides, implies things that are not healthy inherently for our body. And as you say, someone reaches for extra virgin olive oil thinking they're going to get the Mediterranean diet in liquid form, and they get this other stuff. But clearly with adulterated oils, we're dealing with a whole other level of risk. I mean, if someone has an intolerance to peanut oil, soybean oil, granted, refinement usually removes all of the proteins that are responsible for allergic reactions. But if you're dealing with someone who's willing to do this, how good a quality control can you expect from them? So I think those are the two kind of branches of this question.
All right, I want to thank both of you, not only for coming today, but certainly for all that you've both done in terms of raising the profile of the olive oil industry and the benefits of olive oil, and challenges still in front of us. So thank you both very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'd like to ask those who are on the second panel to come forward. Adam Englehardt, Brady Whitlow, Brendan Flynn, Jim Etters, and Mike Bradley. This is the California olive oil industry perspective. And as they're coming forward, I'd like to tell you that the Olive Oil Subcommittee has a very, very eminent advisory committee who will be advising us on some of the solutions that may well involve legislation or other policy approaches as we move forward. And we have some members who are with us, and I don't have the list. I will in a moment. So we have our second panel, and I'll talk about the advisory committee in a moment, but let me welcome the second panel. First of all, Adam. You're not in any order. Yes, Adam. Welcome. Adam Englehardt is the Vice President of Orchard Operations for California Olive Ranch. He manages the operations of 5,000 acres of company orchards that are planted in Arbequina, Arbizana, and Coroniki. And in addition to the California Olive Ranch orchards, Adam oversees grower relations and the purchasing of fruit from an additional 10,000 of super high-density orchards in California, which deliver again, to the California Olive Ranch processing plants. He's a fifth-generation California farmer from Artois, and a graduate of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Welcome, Adam. You start.
I'd like to focus my remarks on the growing aspect of the industry. There are those in this room much more qualified to discuss the chemical properties, standards, and some of the market dynamics in terms of trade. But as we look at the California industry, as Senator Wolk mentioned, I'm a farmer of not only olives, of other commodities, and consider myself a farmer by choice and by profession. And as you look at the California industry in recent years, right now by our count, there's about 28,000 acres of super high-density olives, purposed specifically for olive oil production, in addition to a large amount of acreage for table olive production. That acreage is growing, and it's growing considerably. But I think what really stands in the way of a much more rapid expansion, as mentioned by Senator Berryhill, similar to the wine industry or almonds and walnuts, is the lack of a level playing field for marketing of a California product. And I think one thing is important to make clear in the conversation is that the U.S. is a very large market, and there is a lot of very high-quality imported oil that exists in the world today. However, like the California producers of high-quality oil, those quality producers of imported oil are facing the same challenges in that their product is not being valued as a true extra virgin because of the dilution of that category with some of the lower quality oils. And again, if you look at oil production in California, olive growing in California, it's really a question of highest and best use. The olive tree, especially one grown for olive oil, does not need a lot of water, and that fruit size is not inherently important to yield. The tree itself is very tolerant of adverse soil conditions, including salinity, high sodium counts, as well as drainage conditions, gravel, soil profile. So it's a very tolerant crop and very well suited to a lot of areas that might not otherwise be profitable for intensive agriculture. So I think where you see the olive really fitting into the California farming climate is in these areas that were historically used for either grazing in a lot of cases or had been used in other crop rotations, but without maximizing that yield or using an excessive amount of water, where an olive can go into an area and in most cases used about 1/4 of the water demanded by some of the crops that had been grown there previously. So looking, as you mentioned, the water debate that is currently raging, as you look up and down both north of the Delta and south, there are very substantial areas of land that would be extremely suitable for olive production while using about 1/4 of the water that is now demanded by the current crop. And will also be tolerant of a lot of the salinity issues that plague much of our southern San Joaquin west side districts. And again, what stands in the way of this expansion is not the suitability of that crop, or I think the ability of the California industry. It's that if you look at the gross return, or the net return rather, to a farmer to an acre of olives, in particular, as my area of expertise is in super high density, the return on investment in super high density right now is not conducive to massive plantings. And the reason that is that oil price is being held in check because the worldwide oil price is as low as Dan and Tom both mentioned. Were that ship to be righted, and I think it's important to say that we're not looking for protections to give us an advantage over other producers. I think what I would simply ask is that we have a level playing field, I think as Tom mentioned, in that all product being sold in the United States and California be subject to a true testing regimen and being held to a standard across the board, and that standard be enforced. And I think if that were to take place, you would see some increase in the pricing for olive oil, both at the retail level and also as it would trickle down at the farm gate. That would initiate much more rapid expansion of plantings. Already, I think I mentioned that despite all these challenges we mentioned, the expansion has been pretty rapid. And I think most encouragingly, we're seeing more processors, vertically integrated larger processors, as well as smaller processors and growers entering this market. I mean, a lot of them are sitting at the table here with me today. So it is a vibrant and growing market that I think could be much more so with the creation of a level playing field.
Thank you, Adam. I think we'll wait on questions until we hear from everyone. So let's see. Our second speaker is Brady Whitlow. And Brady, let me introduce you. The president of Corto Olive, located in Lodi, California. This 5-year-old company grows, mills, and markets extra virgin olive oil from super high-density plantings with an annual capacity approaching 500,000 gallons of extra virgin olive oil. Corto Olive is positioned to have a significant impact on California's emerging olive oil industry. Brady spent most of his career in the sales and marketing of specialty food products. He has a BA from the University of Oregon and an MBA from Santa Clara. Brady, you're on.
Thank you, Senator Walk. And I'm very pleased, Senators Berryhill and Malfa, that you're here. This is a big step for olive oil, California olive oil specifically. Briefly, by way of background, no, Whitlow is not an Italian name. I'm IBM, Italian by marriage. Our family I married into is Italian, Cortopassi. Has been in the agricultural business for 4 generations now, since the 20s, both in large-scale farming. We have about 10,000 acres, and food production, tomato cannery, as well as now an olive mill. So we go into this with our eyes wide open. We know what California agriculture is all about. We're not doing this as so much as gentlemen farmers, although we do love olive oil. We're doing this as a real business opportunity. We see the future of a new viable crop in California that will give growers an alternative, a good alternative to grapes or almonds or walnuts, what have you. And so we went into this, again, eyes wide open, and in a big way. We've invested significantly in not only the mill, but in plantings, believing full well that this is a viable business proposition for us, but for many California growers and for California in general. The frustrations we're experiencing, however, are causing us to question our original ideas. We're certainly not going to give up on this. We're all in, and we're all in it for the long run. However, the state of the industry is disappointing, and Tom did a wonderful job of spelling that out for us. We can't, as Adam said, we can't make money if the cheaters are allowed to continue to cheat. And all we ask for is a level playing field. At the fair price for what should be extra virgin olive oil, we can make a go of this industry in California, plant thousands more acres, invest in more mill and equipment, and provide lots of jobs. This is a viable industry if we can put in place some standards that are enforceable. But as California starts to get on the map, and create some size to get the attention of the importers. Remember, we're 1% now. We've doubled in size. We're 2% of consumption in the U.S. We're starting to get the attention of these big guys, and they have all the money and they have all the power, and it's going to be very difficult for us on our own to stand up against them because they are cheating. They're sending us bad oil, and they're not playing by their own rules. So how do we get that level playing field? Well, that's why we're here. So that's what we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendon Flynn is third-generation farmer who was born and raised in Tehama County in Northern California. Pacific Farms was originally started by his grandfather in 1952. Brendon holds a BS in agricultural business from Cal Poly San Luis. After working in many different areas and disciplines related to agribusiness, Brendon decided to return to his family's farming operation to pursue a career in production ag. He's currently the president of California Olive Oil Council. Well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Wolk and Berryhill and LaMalfa. Appreciate giving this the opportunity here to be here today to discuss what is becoming a more and more important industry here in California. I am here representing the California Olive Oil Council. A little background, the California Olive Oil Council will be celebrating its 20th year in existence this March at our annual meeting. And so by virtue of that fact, you can realize that this is not a new issue or a relatively new industry for California. There was production of a resurgence of production of olive oil prior to 20 years ago, and it took a group of pioneering individuals to get together and to establish this voluntary grower producer-based organization to address and to try to communicate to the general public and primarily consumers the qualities of California olive oil and the relative benefit of that to the consumer. So something that's been an ongoing issue and continues to be, and some of the issues have been well laid out here for us today. You mentioned 400 growers or producers. The California Olive Oil Council represents over 400 of those folks, not only producers, but other interested parties of the industry, retailers, food professionals, and the like. There is over 1 million gallons, 1.4 million gallons is the estimate for the 2011 crop. We're looking forward to over 2 million gallons in 2012. And a very rapid expansion after that in the near future. So this is an industry that will continue to grow as new plantings come online, driven primarily by super high density plantings, which are not familiar, sort of the grapevine planting style that Adam mentioned. But that is not to say that there is not a very significant portion of the industry that is represented by smaller producers on what we'd call a little more traditional spacings or more traditional production style. And multiple varieties. You mentioned 50 varieties of olive trees producing oil. There are literally thousands of olive varieties in the world that, and many of those or all of them can produce oil. But and we continue to see new and more and new varieties represented here in California. So it's a very varied representation of the industry, from very small producers of 100 gallons or less all the way up to producers of 1 million gallons or more, and so you see a lot of different viewpoints, but all of them, all of these producers and those who are passionate about olive oil quality and olive oil production are rallying around the same issue that you're hearing here today, which is that quality, in order for the consumer to really receive the quality that is purported on the label and in the bottle, we will need to have some assistance to have strict adherence to the standards, which are very well established internationally and are being refined, more and more refined, or not in the sense of refined olive oil, but refining of the standard on a continual basis. As science improves, as the producers of olive oil improve their ability to analyze olive oil, we're able to very clearly, very quickly, and very concisely differentiate the good from the bad. And an existing term that really represents the good in the olive oil industry is extra virgin. And that's not to say that all olive oil that is not made extra virgin grade is bad, but it is not extra virgin. And if it is not extra virgin, it should not be purported to say so, to be labeled as such. And that's what Adam was talking about, that it's not inexpensive to create good, high-quality olive oil. And you touched upon the health aspects. There are olive oil is a fat in the end, and it is used as such in our diet, but it is a relatively good fat for us. However, as olive oil degrades, it does lose some of those positive properties. Polyphenols, antioxidants, omega-3s, and things of that nature. Not a scientist by trade, but I can throw some of the lingo out there. There are those who are better suited to speak to that, and that science does exist, and like I said, it's continuing to develop, and I think you'll see that we can clearly define what makes a good olive oil, not only good in flavor, but good in health properties as well, and the consumers are desiring that and should be able to get that if that's what they think they're paying for. So California Olive Oil Council, again, a purely voluntary organization, but is well supported by its members. But our real our real stumbling block is a lack of funds. We are continuing to gain steam. However, it is a very expensive proposition to communicate with the consumer in the United States and to communicate with them in a proper and meaningful way. And those types of dollars are difficult to come by when the operators or the processors, producers are operating at break-even or below break-even pricing back to the operation. So it's sort of a chicken and an egg issue here. We don't have the dollars to be able to communicate, but we can't get the dollars to communicate until we are able to get the consumers to realize the true value of the product. So again, looking forward to working with the California legislature on a statewide basis, but we're also endeavoring as an industry to continue to communicate on a national basis and an international basis, as will be represented here later today with folks who are producing, again, high-quality olive oils throughout the world.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Edders, welcome. He is the Director of Land Management for the Yocha-Dihi Winton Nation, located in the Capay Valley. Beautiful, beautiful valley. He is a Yolo County native, and he oversees more than 11,000 acres of tribal land, including a diversified farming and ranching operation, habitat restoration and grant work, a tribal-owned winery, and a 250-acre organic farm. He has spearheaded the tribe's vision of starting its own line of premium agricultural products under the Seca Hills brand. In 2008, he advised the tribe on planting the first large-scale development of super high-density olives in the Capay Valley. In the summer of 2011, the tribe began construction of the Seca Hills Olive Mill, a state-of-the-art mill that will produce premium olive oil from the tribe's harvest and also offer premium local milling for other Capay Valley olive growers. The mill will be ready for production at pretty soon, 2012 fall harvest. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman and subcommittee members, for inviting me here to participate today. The tribe story in agriculture and olive oil is a little bit different than most of the other growers and participants you hear today. Its historical habitants of the Capay Valley, the Yocha-Dihi homeland, is at the heart of the tribe's culture and heritage. The land has always sustained this tribe, and it is from that land that we have grown this agricultural business. Today, the tribe takes great pride in managing more than 11,000 acres in the Capay Valley. The tribe is focused on sustainability and responsible stewardship. It's committed to preserving its land for future generations. We currently farm a dozen different crops: wine grapes, walnuts, almonds, alfalfa, wheat, oats, safflower and sunflower, just a few. We farm 250 acres of certified organic ground and recently planted blueberries and asparagus on that land. We also run 200 head of Angus cross on the tribe's native oak rangeland. But perhaps the most exciting crop that we're growing now is olives. We have 82 acres of super high density olives, and we plan to plant 20 acres of medium density varieties, Picual and Tajaska, this spring. So why olives? About 6 years ago, the tribe purchased 90 acres just outside the town of Gwinda, and this land had poor soils and limited water supply, like we talked about today. We used it mostly for grazing cattle, but once we looked at options for putting this land to better use, we realized that olives were a perfect fit. We planted our first planting of super high density in 2008. Today we are beginning to sell our own oil under our own agricultural products brand, Seca Hills. In the tribe's native Patwin language, Seca means blue, and the blue hills run along the western edge of the Capay Valley. Our excitement about Capay Valley olives is based on our belief that the climate and the soils are almost perfect for growing top quality fruit, and as we all know, great oil starts with great fruit. But to preserve freshness and create the highest quality oil, that fruit must be milled in a reasonable amount of time. And we quickly realized that other yellow olive growers had what other yellow olive growers had long known. The lack of an olive mill in Yolo County was a significant challenge for our young industry. As a result, we have just about finished building our own Seca Hills olive mill, state-of-the-art equipment. Starting this fall, we will mill our own fruit within just a few miles and minutes of where it's grown. We also wanted to provide the opportunity for other local growers to use this state-of-the-art equipment in our facility, and the tribe really has a passion about working with other growers in western Yolo County and the Capay Valley. Our mill will have a tasting room, lounge that will feature the tribe's products along with other products from the valley. Agritourism has a growing potential in the Capay Valley, and Yochadihi is one of many growers excited about the prospect of building the reputation of the Capay Valley as one of the premier olive growing regions of the world, and bringing customers out to our farms to taste the product and hopefully purchase some also. The Yochadihi Wintu Nation looks forward to working with all of you in the development of the California industry. It is really exciting to be a part of it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Our last speaker, Mike Bradley, is the president of Veronica Foods Company, which was established in 1924. He's an olive oil expert, enthusiast, organic producer, and importer. He is an advocate for stricter quality standards, I'm told.
We're going to do the visual too.
Okay. We're going to be setting up for this speaker? Okay. All right. I'll read more slowly.
Thank you, Senator Wolf.
Welcome, Mr. Bradley.
Thank you, senators, and thank you, panel. I can't begin to tell you how amazed and grateful I am for this day. It's been a long time coming. My wife's family and my family have been in the olive oil business since 1913, and we have struggled, and we have struggled mightily against what some of the speakers have pinpointed before me. And if I could, I'd like to kind of summarize that so we can get a clear and simple view. The four horsemen of the apocalypse here, what we're really up against. And I thank Adam for pointing out that these monsters are not just affecting California, they're affecting all producers in the world who are really trying to create and make an authentic business around olive oil. And they are, in order of importance, the subsidy. There is no company in the world outside of Europe who can make olive oil, any kind of olive oil, including the lowest grade that we can talk about at the current world market price. It's not possible. Tom mentioned earlier in his talk about that $6 a gallon. What does $6 a gallon mean to you in your operation?
About 40% of my cost.
Okay. It's the same for Tunisians, it's the same for Moroccans, it's the same for Turks, it's the same for anybody outside of the EU. It's simply not possible in the world to make a profit and produce olive oil against the European subsidy. That's number one. Number two, and this has been touched upon here, is we have standards. Really what we have is lack of standards. The grade that's been described as extra virgin is a bad joke.
And everybody who's in the business knows it. It's the dirty little secret that they whisper about in the corners, and everyone knows that the oil, the great majority of the oil that's not just coming into the United States, it's off the shelves. Somebody else pointed out that 2 people went to jail here recently in Spain at 2 companies, The standards are a joke, and they're abysmal, and they really need reform, desperate reform. So we've got subsidies, we've got standards. And then someone else mentioned, and this is no small problem, it's fraud. We've got a major problem with fraud. Fraud, as you know, is corruption. Corruption is infectious. And when it goes untreated, it travels through the veins into the capillaries, and it infects every single aspect of this business. I brought with me some samples. I'm going to talk about them, but I picked samples that are just a wide variety of the things that we've encountered over the last 10 years. And every single oil and every single test that my company has made, we have made agents at FDA in California aware of. Over 10 years ago, we went and we basically, with one of the largest wholesale distributors in the United States, we sampled their product, we tested their product, and we proved that every single product that they were selling in that store was either adulterated or counterfeit. And we brought that information, and we presented that information, and nothing ever happened. Now, so that's 3. And the 4th one, and this is really important, is education. Sarah Malfa mentioned that many people don't understand what good olive oil is about, and how should they? How could they? when the bulk of what they're consuming is defective, how are you supposed to learn? And so I think someone from UC Davis here recently came to the conclusion after a study that many Americans actually prefer the defect that we've been discussing called fustiness, or fermented olives, because that's what they've been used to tasting. My experience has been contrary to that in this regard. When Americans, like the rest of the world, when they're given the opportunity to taste really authentic, well-made olive oil next to fermented, they always choose the right thing. They get it immediately because they understand what fresh means. And there's no way that when you're tasting fresh, well-made oil that you miss it. There's no way to describe the word fresh. I mean, you know it when you smell it and when you taste it. And well-made olive oil, you can taste it there. And some of the defects are a result of the largest single defect, I think Dan Flynn pointed out, is due to rancidity, which is age. Now think about this for a second. This is one of the largest crops in human history. The Spanish alone have 470,000 tons of olive oil that they're bringing forward from last year. It's already a year old. And I can tell you as a buyer, the best olive oil sells first. So what's left is what didn't sell. Now this olive oil is going to be carried over into this crop, and this crop is 1,500,000 tons in Spain alone. The rest of the Mediterranean, when you throw everybody in, we're looking at about 3 million tons of olive oil, with most of it accompanied by a subsidy. There is just absolutely no way in the world that California or anyone else outside of Europe can compete against this. It's not possible, and as Brady pointed out, it's not a level playing field. No doubt in my mind whatsoever that California compete. No doubt in my mind that California is going to be a player. Eventually, we're going to get this, and we're getting it now. We've got creative people, we've got smart people, we've got young people, and they're going to be the future, provided you guys level this playing field and make it possible for not just Californians, but there's people in Georgia who want to grow olive trees. And again, I want to thank Adam for pointing out that this is, one of the big difficulties in this industry is the provincial nature of it. And if we fall into the same trap that the Europeans have, and we become chauvinistic about it, and we try to make special rules, and we say that we're better than them because we're here, it's a big mistake. We got to be honest, and we've got to hold ourselves to the same standards and that we want to hold others to. And good olive oil, well-made olive oil, anywhere in the world we can compete with, provided that subsidy is taken away. Now, I'm going to stop, and what I brought with me, I want to show some very basic examples of the kinds of things that we run into on a daily basis. And as I hold them, I'll describe them. Can you hear me back there? This is I'm going to go through these one at a time. This is a can, it's called Casalina, the label on the can. It says pure olive oil, no cholesterol. It's got a very nice picture. Imported from Italy on the side of the can. And if you flip the can around, it's got a distribution clause that lists the name of a company in Redwood City, California, with the zip code 94065. The name of the distribution company is F as in Frank, C as in Charlie, G as in George, P as in Paul. There is no such company. They don't exist. Can't find them in the telephone book, can't find them if you call the operator. This is counterfeit olive oil.
My goodness.
Okay? We run into this kind of...
A quick question. So, in all likelihood, in all likelihood, that's probably not all olive oil in that can.
I have an analysis on this can, and you're right, it's not all olive oil.
Okay, thank you.
Here's another can. This is called, who says counterfeiters don't have a sense of humor? This is called Caputo. Caputo Olive Oil Company, cold pressed, imported from Italy. And this company actually does exist. You can actually find them on the internet. I have an analysis. The reason why I brought this can is they also are in the food service business, and they pack a 35-pound, what's known as a jib. You go into Costco, you go into a restaurant depot, you'll see those large plastic jug in a box. And a local wholesaler came to us and said, geez, we'd like to get some good olive oil. And we said, well, what are you using? And they said, well, come and get a sample. So we picked it up and brought it in, and this was the brand they were using. And the jib, 35-pound jib, no pack date, no lot code, no ingredients, no nothing, took off the cap, no tamper-proof seal. Open, right? Open it, and there it is. Wow. Had it analyzed, sunflower oil.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, sunflower, the percentage we don't have exactly, but we had it analyzed at Modern Olives, well, for my money, the best lab in the world, counterfeit. Wow. Okay? Now, just imagine for a second, if these kinds of people are willing to do this in a restaurant chain and just food service institutional business, what's happening on the industrial level? Nobody's talked about that today. But if you go into any store and you look at the products like spaghetti sauce, pesto, there's hundreds of them now that have, quote, olive oil in them. Yeah. Imagine what's happening on that industrial level, tankers going down the road. Here's another one. This was sold at this is called Supremo Italiano. This was sold at Restaurant Depot. I don't know if they still have it. I picked this sample. This sample is about 7 years old. This is when I first went to Food and Drug in California after shopping in their store. One of my salesmen came, he said, Mike, there's no way I can compete against this stuff. We cannot sell oil at this price. It's below our cost. I said, go get some samples. We took the samples down, sent them out to the labs. This came back as mostly pumice olive oil. Now, we've had, in the interest of saving time, I don't want to go into a lot of discussion about this, but there's been this discussion about seed oil and oil made from something other than olive. And somehow it's considered a more egregious sin to take, say, sunflower or soy or canola and mix it. And I tell you that if you take a look at there's a reason why refined olive oil is a legally different substance. Somebody mentioned it earlier here. There's really only a couple of reasons why you'd want to buy olive oil. One is the flavor, and one is the nutrition. Refined olive oil has no flavor. Not a little flavor, it has none. In the refining process, all of the flavor is removed, 100%. And the antioxidants that the people talk about, the doctors talk about, and that the government recommends, they're destroyed as well in the refining process. So, now, I'm not saying that refined olive oil doesn't have some benefit and some uses. It certainly does, but it's a totally legally different substance than extra virgin. And so, from my point of view, if you're mixing refined olive oil with extra virgin, or you're mixing a lower grade called pumice olive oil made from the pits and skins, and what's the difference between that and mixing with sunflower? It's a legally different substance. It's fraud. And this is the problem. So, there's three. This one is really interesting, and I brought it because it's a great example. Here's if you look at the label, and we'll pass this around. If you look at the front of this label, it says Italian extra virgin olive oil. Flip it around, and here's what it says on the back. Extra virgin olive oil, Mediterranean-style blend, ingredients, vegetable oil, and up to 65% extra virgin olive oil. We haven't had it analyzed yet. We will. Our guess is 5 to 10%. This is underplayed. This is in grocery store shelves in Southern California today.
The first item on a label usually is whatever the highest.
The law says the first ingredient listed on a label must be the one of greatest occurrence.
So there's no way it's 65 if the other product was first.
Okay, here's an example. Now, this is an olive oil. It's an authentic olive oil, an extra virgin olive oil that just sat under fluorescent lights for about 4 months. And you can see that it's an amber color, kind of the color of beer. This is every extra virgin olive oil. If you leave it and you let the lights affect it, if you expose it to UV, it'll turn this color. Again, about 6 months. This is an olive oil we call Evergreen. This has sat on my desk for 7 years. I'm not exaggerating. It has never turned color. Industrial dye, Tom mentioned it. This is the kind of fraud. Now, what is this industrial dye? What is it made from? What effect does it have on people? No lot code number, no date code, no nothing. And then, lest you think it's just the big guys and the bad guys, this is oil from a boutique olive oil store, brand new olive oil store. This guy, one of these says organic. It's got sunflower oil in it. Oh, canola oil in it. And he claims on the internet that this is the exact same oil used at the French Laundry by Thomas Keller. And nobody says a word. It goes by. So, again, these are some examples. I brought with me some lab analysis I plan on sharing with the senators after the meeting, and if anybody would like to ask questions about this, I'd be happy to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oh, my goodness, Mr. Bradley. Thank you very much. Questions of the panel?
Yeah.
That was a great presentation.
Yeah, very much so. Everyone on the panel.
Senator LaMalfa.
Thank you, ma'am. When you want to get to the point where you can rely on the label and rely on what you're getting as a consumer as well as what growers are relying on, that they're on a competitive playing field, that extra virgin really is extra virgin, and that the good name of olive oil is being held up by the product the consumer's buying. As growers and processors, how far do you want government to go in requiring labels or requiring samples to be tested? To what extent are they tested, like, under an electron microscope? Or, how far do you go to detect if there's rancidity, or do you have to differentiate that the other oils being mixed in are actually, this is sunflower or just some other foreign substance, type of oil? Because, there's a balance there of how much you have to do to verify what you've produced. Does it need to be every vat, every lot, or do you want to go more to a random sample thing where anybody could, from a regulatory group, come in and grab one sample and pull it, run all those tests, and have the spot check be the deterrent to anybody out there producing? How high or how low do you want to go with labeling and samples and depth of sample and their...
I think
just to add to that, I mean, has this panel and has the industry thought about a comprehensive ask here today? Because, I mean, we're sitting here, obviously, a lot of this stuff is just outrageous. I mean, just unbelievable. This is the most interesting informational hearing I've ever been to. And obviously, something needs to be done here. And when you talk about a level playing field, obviously you're not on one. But we got to think as a group here and as a team, what we do about making it fair and making it level. And I guess to just add to Senator LaMalfa's questions is, have you thought about a comprehensive fix here on what you might need?
Let me start with that. I'm sure Adam will add. I'm really not worried about how far government's going to go at this point, since we have nothing. So I mean, anything will be helpful.
Hey!
I knew I'd get a reaction out of Mike there. But to be serious, we are very confident in what we're doing, and we're willing to do any testing that the industry comes up with. California Olive Oil Council has a seal and a standard and a testing protocol that we're happy to abide by, and we would be happy to bolster it and make it even stronger.
But to follow on that, I'm a grower of crops too, and it's a different deal, but government could make requirements that you would have to test every vat to such a great extent that each test sample to run it through a lab would be maybe a lot more expensive than what you want. I know we all want to reach a goal here, but to what level of testing or labeling is one that's going to be economically good for you to ensure the standards that you want, but not be wishing 5 years from now, like, man, why do we go down there and ask for that? I can't afford it as a grower or as a processor, et cetera. So the balance, I guess, you're looking for, and maybe it's a fairly low level of number of samples taken, but just a great big fine on the other end for anybody found committing fraud or not holding up, a huge fine that scares the heck out of the bad actors. So please.
I think one thing we've looked at and Brendon addressed is the COC has been around for how many years? 20. And one of the things I think the COC was most instrumental in doing is establishing a voluntary COC standard that many growers adhered to. And this was fairly effective in policing ourselves to some degree. And the advantage we have at this point is because it is a fairly young industry, much of the infrastructure and many of the plantings are set up in a way that can easily produce a quality product. But again, to address some of the issues that you brought up, Senator LaMalfa, last week in Dixon, we actually had a meeting that was very well attended with over 300 grower attendees to discuss a federal marketing order draft that would deal specifically with the establishment of a standard and provide for an assessment of domestically produced olive oil that would then create a funding source for the development, promotion, and enforcement of that standard. And as most of you are familiar with as growers of other commodities, most other large commodities in the United States, as well as California, have entered into voluntary marketing order programs based on both on a federal and a state level. And in most cases, those marketing orders' primary purpose is to establish a grade of trade for a product. So I think we have many avenues and possibilities for correcting this problem. It's my personal belief that the establishment of this marketing order on a federal level is going to be the most expeditious route to dealing with this problem and essentially creating a law that the FDA and USDA would then be required to deal with. The challenge we will have at that point is the initial marketing order would apply only to domestically produced product. And at that point, we would then need to apply for what's referred to as an 8E order, which would apply those standards to any product sold and marketed within the U.S., which would then establish a level playing field. And I think as Mike alluded to, we would like to see, as part of this marketing order, we'd like to see the standard be fined and updated to utilize some of this new chemistry. But even if the current standard recently adopted by the USDA, which is a voluntary standard, were to be enforced through regulatory channels or through a marketing order, I think would be our best step to correct the issue, my opinion.
Would you anticipate that this would end up with the label, the good housekeeping label, the UL label, your version of that says this is good oil, and that consumers would differentiate in that between, what you have, but also consumers shop price, so they might look at the one that's has the good label on it, but they'll see the cheaper stuff here. So how far do you want to go with the enforcement that it's not even imported or allowed to be sold on our shelves, or that people have to decide, well, I want the good stuff that we know about, or I can still buy the cheap stuff.
Well, there's others I think that can speak to the consumer preference better than I can, but I think one thing is certain, that the consumer in the U.S. does recognize extra virgin as a premium category of trade. That being said, I think if a standard were passed, that would then ensure through inspection and testing that what is labeled as extra virgin is in fact extra virgin. So you asked the question about what is the frequency of sample. And I think we have a significant precedent that's been set in many of these other marketing orders, as well as the import food safety law recently passed, that sets a standard for frequency of sample as a statistically relevant number of samples by container type by volume. So there is some precedent there and language that's in place in other orders that would require processors or handlers, as they're defined in the marketing order, to ask for, prior to the sale of a product, to ask that a USDA or a representative of the USDA inspection service collect samples from a statistically relevant number of those containers that would then be verified that they are in fact meet the quality grades that they're being sold and marketed as.
I'd like to add two things real quickly. One, you're going to learn a lot when you hear from Paul Miller from Australia. The Australians have taken a strong lead in the world on this problem, and they've developed a very good standard with a lot of good thought into it. And to the point of cost, some of the new methods of testing for adulteration, from whether it's adulteration from pumice oil, olive pumice, or other oils, are much less expensive than they have been. So we may be able to get to a point where we can test, and again, Mr. Miller will speak to that. The other thing relative to the extra virgin versus others, and Dan Flynn alluded to this, there's a need and a use and a desire for non-extra virgin olive oil. And that's fine. We embrace that. We encourage it. The rest of the world uses virgin oil. Well, that's not our problem. We just don't want them to call extra virgin or non-extra virgin oil, which doesn't cost much.
Would you remind me again, extra virgin is that first squeeze, and then virgin is when you've taken, I mean, it's still one thing when it's all olive oil.
I'm going to let
garbage in it, you don't have rancidity or any of that other stuff.
Right.
If it's all good oil, you just have extra virgin, and you have virgin that is maybe the second pass through the olive, and that's still good oil, right? I would still buy that as a consumer, maybe if I'm shopping price or whatever, yes.
I'm going to let Mike handle that question, because it's a complicated question.
And then the other half of that is, can you detect in testing for extra virgin versus good extra virgin versus good virgin? Can your processes?
The answer is yes, you can. And again, there's a lot of nuance after you get past extra virgin. There's a lot of nuance, because there can be good virgin and really bad virgin. So I'll let Mike.
Mike, you want to wade into that?
Well, again, is this on? Yeah.
Yes.
Again, and we've the panel's touched upon this, and I don't know how we can talk about this at a later time, because it really is complex, and it's one of the difficult problems, trying to make a simple solution to such a complex problem. But chemistry is huge. And as Brady mentioned, the Australians, and with the help of the Germans, by the way, Christian Goertz, the German chemist who, in an effort to stop the flow of really bad oil into Germany, was the guy who really brought to the fore these two new tests called DAGs and PPPs, which detect slippery business. In other words, they detect soft column refining, which is a way that you can take oil that's lampante, you can refine it, and it goes undetected by current IOC tests. Now, the question of extra virgin, again, I don't want to get too far afield on this thing of refining, but the question of extra virgin, it's such a huge category, and it's one of the problems. It's a pass or fail system. And if you pass by the skin of your teeth, if you get a D minus, you still are an extra virgin. And it doesn't matter if you won the gold medal at the LA County Fair and you got an A++ on both your chemistry and sensory, you're still only an extra virgin. And this is part of the problem. companies like the folks sitting here at this table and many others in the world who are trying to make excellent quality get the same grade as someone who's getting by the skin of their teeth. And there are so many tricks that can be played that are not detected. For example, you can take an oil that fails the chemistry test and say let's take one protocol of the chemistry test. It's called FFA, and the IOC and the NAOA say that 0.8 FFA is the maximum amount of FFA that you can have in an olive oil and call it extra virgin. FFA is kind of a freshness quotient, is a simple way to put it. So you produce some olive oil and the stuff sat on the ground for a while and you picked it late and you come in with 1.2. You fail the test. But you crush some in November and you got a 0.3 or a 0.2 FFA. You mix them together and suddenly the oil that didn't pass passes the chemistry test. However, that oil that had a 1.2 that really didn't pass the chemistry test, that defect will show up if you have a really trained taster to find it. So this problem, I'm not saying there isn't a solution. There is a solution, and I'm confident it can be worked out if there's the willingness to really look at it. And I think it can be done so it's not exorbitantly expensive and where it punishes. And there's several ideas. One is that you could have quantities up to a certain quantity you test, so the small farmers aren't unduly penalized by this thing. Another way is to have all imported oils tested and have the importer pay for it. Part of the cost. They must be tested as they come in. Policing agencies like the COC. If you take and you compare the olive oil industry to the wine industry, the shenanigans that go on in the olive oil industry would not be tolerated in the wine industry, because there's this huge industry pressure, competitive pressure, and they rat on each other, they check each other out, and they do it on a regular basis, and that's a good thing. But we don't have that internationally, that kind of esprit de corps that you really need. And again, I don't want to. The last thing I want to do is paint this picture where it's like it's them against us. Yeah. It's not that way. The best producers in the world, Boundary Bend, which for my money has done more to change the culture and the economics of olive oil than any other company in the world, almost went broke last year. They're not just producing great olive oil, they're the most efficient company in the world. And they almost went broke because they cannot compete against this subsidy. So there's a lot of problems and there's a lot of issues, and they really need to be handled one by one, and they need to be studied. And you've got a great group here. You've got a great group of people internationally who would also contribute, and I recommend that we begin to look into this and dig deeper.
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that, and we can't fix everything, and especially with international trade, but at least we can start and make some really good headway on what we know is in that bottle or in that can there, and help you with the tools to do it. But it's really got to be industry driven and explained well to us, and this body here is not going to do this that many times, so you really probably want to try and hit it the first time, or at least 90%, and then we refine, sorry about that word, the legislation as we go along in little bits. But you really want to hit this right out of the chute, and so we're here to help, and I appreciate your candor on this. But it is very important, and it's a beautiful product, and it would be something that we could do so much more of in this state. As was mentioned earlier, 1 to 2% of what is used in the U.S. has come from the California, the recent influx. Yeah, there's so much potential out there, especially for quality product, that once the consumers try it, they love it. When I give people our medium grain rice from California, they're used to that other stuff from somewhere else. They love it, so I get that. So, and one last shot. Madonna keeps running through my mind here. Have you contacted her about being your national promo on this thing? You can just go through the roof there. Anyway, thank you.
Senator Berry.
Yeah, thank you. And as I sit here and as I've listened to everything, I sit here and I'm very frustrated because we want to help you. But as I listen to some of your problems, obviously you have some federal problems in this thing too. One of my questions is, have you talked to Karen Ross, our Director of Agriculture, Secretary of Agriculture here in California? Obviously, we're going to have to do something federally in this thing. If we can do something in California to start this thing on its way, I mean, we're at the infancy of a beautiful industry that's going to bring a lot of jobs, a lot of tax revenues into this state. Very exciting. But we got to keep you healthy. So we're here, I think like Doug said, we are here to help you. We want to do something, and we'd like to do something maybe even this year to start this process going. But obviously, you're going to have to use as many tools as you can to go back federally too and take care of a problem that obviously is out of control, and that we're going to have to handle at the border as it comes in. So anything that we can do, let us know. Thank you for coming, and it's been a very interesting panel.
It's been a terrific panel. I want to thank all 5 of you for your contributions, and stay tuned. We're not finished yet, as you heard from my colleagues, but thank you very much, and let's move on to our next panel. We have the world view now. Mr. Bauer and Mr. Miller. Welcome. Bob Bauer has been the president of the North American Olive Oil Association since 2002, and it's headquartered in New Jersey, in Neptune, New Jersey. Their membership is comprised of U.S. and Canadian companies who market olive oil in North America and foreign companies supplying olive oil to the North American market. It's part of the Association of Food Industries, an association of nearly 1,000 companies worldwide that foster the international trade of food products. Before joining the NAOOA, Mr. Bauer was a journalist, beginning in newspapers, and then went to trade publications in the transportation field, and then to the food industry. He also worked as the editor of a grocery section of the Supermarket News, which is the leading trade publication in the supermarket field. He attended Temple University, that's in my hometown, for 2 years, and completed his college education and received his bachelor's degree from Glassboro State, now known as Rowan University. Welcome, Mr. Bauer.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. Established in 1989, the NAOA is a trade association of marketers, packagers, and importers of olive oil in the U.S., Canada, and suppliers abroad. The association strives to foster a better understanding of olive oil and its taste, versatility, and health benefits. We applaud Senator Wolk for including us in the voice of the importer community here at this meeting, and look forward to ongoing participation in the subcommittee's activities. You'll quickly see how similar our goals are to those who've already spoken today. At the heart of the NAOA's formation was the creation of a quality assurance program. NAOA members, again, importers of high-quality olive oil, recognized that North American government authorities were not allocating resources to prevent suspected economic fraud, as there was no perceived public health risk. The NAOA pioneered quality control testing of olive oil in the U.S. has been conducting the most far-reaching quality control program now for more than 20 years. It should also be noted that the condition of NAOA membership is that the random samples of members' oils collected from retail shelves throughout the year must meet the recognized international standards set forth by the International Olive Council. Failure to do so is grounds for expulsion from the organization. Over the past 20 years, the NAOA, in conjunction with the United Nations Chartered International Olive Council, the worldwide body that sets standards for the olive oil industry, has tested thousands of samples of olive oil. The existence of the NAOA's testing program has greatly deterred those who might have otherwise been tempted to market substandard product in the U.S. In spite of the allegations made here by others today, consumers can be confident they are buying quality product. Nearly 99% of the sales volume represented by the oil sampled over those 20 years has met the international standard for olive oil. As a result of its testing program, the NAOA has taken action in respect to those packers, foreign and domestic, who have not complied with the international standard by alerting federal and state officials. And our successes have not been limited just to our testing. For example, last year, while buying olive oil samples at a regional grocery chain in Southern California, I came across a bottle labeled blended extra virgin olive oil. On the back, the label said the product was a blend of extra virgin olive oil and vegetable oils, similar to the example that Mr. Bradley gave. We contacted the owner. In fact, I did it right from the store. And they actually had the gall to tell me that FDA had approved that label, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But we contacted them and the retailer, but neither was willing to do anything about removing the product. But we were happy. We notified several government agencies, federal and state agencies. We were happy we received word just earlier this month from the California Department of Public Health that the agency forced the brand owner to correct the problems. And we'll be certain to follow up by visiting that chain again very shortly to ensure the mislabeled product is not still being sold. I also received a call earlier this week from an inspector in the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations about a likely action against a company we notified FDA about. These are, particularly the second item where FDA is acting, is it's something that makes us happy. We were the ones who provided the information to FDA regarding the health benefits and petition for the health claim that's allowed on the products. And we've been asking for years for them to pick up their enforcement to defend the claim that they are allowing people to make. So we're happy to see that. The NOA continues to seek a level playing field and is pleased the 4 states, California, Connecticut, Oregon, and New York, have responded to industry requests and created standards of identity for olive oil sold within their boundaries. In fact, I remember speaking with domestic producers while we had things underway in Connecticut, and we decided to work together here in California. I testified at a hearing at this very building in support of a state standard for olive oil sold in California. The NAOA also supported the update of the voluntary USDA grade standards for olive oil, even though the petition filed by the California producers was less stringent than the international standard. But the domestic industry said it could not meet the international standard, as noted earlier. The NAOA members, as I mentioned before, are required to meet that tougher standard. The NAOA randomly samples more than 200 olive oils every year, without bias with respect to producer size, country of origin, or economic interest. The sampling is spread throughout all channels of trade: retail, food service, and the industrial/ingredient use. We've heard statistics today about high levels of economic adulteration in the category. The premise of widespread problem is not correct. So again, over 20-plus years of testing proves this. The market share of the oils that do not meet the standard typically is 1-2% of the olive oils available for purchase. Having said that, any economic adulteration is unacceptable. But while we're all anxious to put a stop to the problem, we can't allow ourselves to act in a hasty manner by relying on tests that have been rejected by the world's experts on olive oil. The PPP and DAG tests touted today were in fact rejected by the International Olive Council and its expert panel of chemists. If these tests have been improved, those seeking to use them should go through internationally recognized channels through the organization of experts that represents 98% of the world's olive oil production. The NAOA is a signatory to the IOC's Quality Control Monitoring Agreement. And at the last signatories meeting in October, the IOC Executive Director said the organization was reviewing these test methods again. When I was given the floor, I began my comments by commending the IOC for conducting such a review. I said it there and I'll say it again here. If one or both of these tests in question are adopted by the IOC, the NAOA will fully support their use. Organoleptic panel tests, taste tests if you will, have also been cited today. While these tests can be useful, we don't think it's wise to base classifications of such economic value on tests that contain any level of subjectivity. Panel tests, whether conducted in California, Georgia, Spain, or anywhere else, are subject to bias. Now, much of that bias is unintentional, but some of it's clearly nationalistic. Another topic discussed today is a possible petition for a marketing order for olive oil. An olive oil marketing order would increase the costs and thereby reduce the affordability of a very healthy product, domestic or imported, to U.S. consumers. And this could be detrimental to a public health policy that encourages U.S. consumers to eat healthy. The rationale for the marketing order is based on the recent findings cited by UC Davis. But there's no scientific basis to support UC Davis's claims for the need for increased quality. The message is based on methods that don't rise to the level of proper study. As pointed out following the release of both studies, the UC Davis reports are based on statistically insignificant sampling and on rejected laboratory tests and subjective taste testing methods. The mission of the Olive Center at UC Davis is to grow the California olive oil industry. Only one result would have made UC Davis and the producers who funded the studies happy. Using those rejected chemical tests and suggested taste tests help them attain their desired results. We, on the other hand, don't have such an agenda. If the test results that we conduct show an oil meets the international standard, that's good. If it doesn't, it allows us to take steps to try to address the problem and clean up the industry. Our 20-plus years of testing has shown some mislabeling and adulteration, but at a level of 1 to 2% of market share, not at a level that would require testing of every domestic and imported production line. And my understanding with other marketing orders I've seen is that marketing orders require the testing of every lot that's produced. So a marketing order is an expensive and excessive response. A research and promotion order, on the other hand, would raise substantially more money that could be used to educate consumers about this wonderful product. As I noted earlier, there are a lot of areas of agreement with everyone in this room. At last week's marketing order event, it was suggested that an FDA standard of identity for olive oil could still be helpful in combating the olive oil quality issues. The NLA has felt that way for quite some time. In fact, we petitioned FDA in the early 1990s to adopt the international standard as the U.S. standard of identity for olive oil. Since an FDA standard is mandatory, we were surprised when the California Olive Oil Council declined to work with us to encourage FDA to act on our petition, and instead filed a petition with USDA regarding the voluntary USDA grade standard. An FDA standard of identity for olive oil that matches the international trade standard, against which 98% of the world's olive oil is produced and traded upon, would put the U.S. on a level playing field with the rest of the world and greatly enhance the opportunity for government and private action against companies that don't meet that standard. As you know, there's a standard of identity for olive oil sold in California. There's also agreement among all today's speakers that even the very basic testing, the basic IOC procedures, could easily detect some of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. Product marketed by companies known to mislabel bottles and tins as extra virgin olive oil, even though they've added less expensive oils to the product. We've notified FDA about such companies. We've notified state agencies about such companies. Senator Walk and members of the subcommittee, there's a chance to make an immediate impact by putting pressure on the appropriate state agencies to take action against such companies with the laws that already exist today, while still looking to the future to improve and determine other ways to encourage a greater level of quality. These are instances of blatant misbranding and should be very easy to prosecute, because again, the testing is very cut and dry, and it's very easy to detect, and there's really no defense for it. Only 1 or 2 successes along these lines is all that's needed to send a strong message that will reverberate throughout California and perhaps throughout the country. It would also create a model for other states to follow, something that would help California producers compete in other states. Importers and imported olive oil have unfairly been cast in a bad light in recent times. As you've heard today, it's these same importers who helped create and have funded the industry's most complete quality control program. So there's a disconnect there. These importers and the NAOA stand ready to continue their efforts and to support any quality control efforts based on universally agreed upon sound science. We thank you again for the opportunity to participate today and look forward to future opportunities to participate in the workings of the subcommittee. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bauer, after the last panel, you certainly do present a challenging testimony, which I want to delve into, but I would like to first allow Paul Miller to go forward, and then we'll return with some questions and concerns that the panel may have, that the subcommittee may have. Mr. Miller, welcome. I know that you have been the president of the Australian Olive Association Limited, the olive industry body in Australia, since 2001. He chairs the committee that developed and oversees the new Australian standard for olive oils and olive pomace oils. He also led the Australian Olive Industry Code of Practice, which is with its certified Australian extra virgin branding. He is an agricultural scientist with a lifetime in farming and research. He's a director of several businesses in the wine industry, grows wine, grapes, chestnuts, and advises olive companies in Australia and the U.S. And he has also recently established a specialist food oil technology company, Oil Miller Limited. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Senator Walk and committee. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. For a long time, I guess probably the last 6 years, the Australian industry has been cooperating very closely with counterparts around the world, none more so than the Californian olive industry, and it gives me great pleasure to be here and to see your interest in this particularly important subject. In my time as President of the Australian Olive Association, I've also become involved in committees around the world that included helping found a committee in Europe for Eurofed lipids, which is the technical and industrial body that represents those industries in Europe, and more recently founding an expert committee on olive oil for the American Oil Chemists Society, which is a global body that is very important in this whole equation. Certainly in Australia, our experience has been very similar to the USA in terms of the state of the market there. It is the case that greater than 50% of what is sold on the Australian market does not make the grade. Certainly in the retail sector and in the food service sector, it tends to be worse than that, although it fluctuates a little. That greater than 50% in the Australian market is generally made up from government-sponsored testing in Australia of around about 70% of the imported product and around about 20% of the domestically produced product not making the grade. And by not making the grade, I mean in particular not making the grade for extra virgin. Certainly our view is increasingly that there is extra virgin and the rest, and I refer back to Dan Flynn's talk earlier on where he said you can envisage a line above which is extra virgin and below which is lower grade product. In the consumer sector in Australia, and I believe in the US, that's pretty much the way it goes. People who know about olive oil would differentiate in that way. We certainly tried working with the International Olive Council for a number of years, and the Australian government has also been down that path. We've come up against resistance to what we've been trying to do in forums like Codex Alimentarius in the UK and subsequently in Malaysia, where their Fats and Oils Committee meets. I'm pleased to say that the California Olive Oil Council, along with the US government, has been working with us at Codex Alimentarius on these matters, very much alongside and with the same view that we have. After many years of attempting to, I guess, run with what is essentially a European standard, although it's called an International Olive Council standard, we identified numerous deficiencies in that, and in fact we came across these deficiencies using science that was developed in Europe. If you try to sell oil, as I have done, into Northern Europe and in particular into Germany and Austria, as early as 2006 when we sent oils there, the standards and the technology that's in the Australian standard, which is not in the International Olive Council standard, are applied. The retail sector there has woken up in Germany, and generally you get very good olive oil, in particular extra virgin olive oil, in those countries. So I'm referring to major companies like Aldi and Lidl, who are huge retailers. The German government has seen fit to apply the technology that we apply now in the Australian standard. In developing the Australian standard, it was a process of consensus. It was a government-sponsored initiative which included everyone in the supply chain, government, scientists, and importantly, consumer groups. And I would encourage you to involve those people because they have obviously the major vested interest in this. So the Australian standard was really a consumer-oriented standard developed to try and simplify and provide a solution to this problem. And I'm confident that it sets a good base from which the US can work, and we're only too happy to help in any way we can as the US industry seeks to pursue, and in fact the US government seeks to pursue, hopefully, a better situation. In Australia in particular, we found a lot of product being sold as extra virgin that had been refined, and so a major part of the technology in our standard was focused on detecting that, which comes directly from the German experience. Now, having said that, I'm also pleased to say that this technology, which I know the International Olive Council has criticised, is ISO accredited and AOCS accredited. So the major fats and oils body in the world, in fact technically the American Oil Chemists Society, is happy with the technology, as is the International Standards Organisation. In our experience with the International Olive Council, Australia actually considered joining. And then leading up to 2005, the rules were changed. The International Olive Council, as a UN body, used to work on consensus, so all members got a vote. And membership was paid on the basis of a formula which was about how much you consumed as well as how much you produced. In 2005, that was changed to be purely how much you produced, and voting was changed to be on that basis, so no more consensus. In my view, that was done to protect a structural defect in this global industry, and that structural defect is really driven by institutionalized subsidization of the European industry that has left it lagging behind new industries in the olive sector like those in Australia and the US. Those industries in Europe cannot make more than about 30, at the most 30% extra virgin grade. The way the industries are run, most olives are swept up off the ground, so that oil has to be refined, and that's fine. The world, however, is demanding extra virgin. So there is this natural tension that has evolved between the engine of production, currently based around the Mediterranean, and the markets, in particular new markets like Australia, the USA, China and so on, that are demanding a higher grade product. So there we have it. In Australia we have a standard, and that, what does that mean? Well, what it means actually initially is that we have a document, a piece of paper, and that doesn't mean anything unless something happens with it, as you well know, and has been the experience here in Australia. Over I guess the 10-year period when this has been being pursued in Australia increasingly by government, there has been some government action. We have a system in Australia where we have a Trade Practices Act, or Trade Practices legislation, and the basic principle under that legislation is that what is on the label should be in a bottle, as a consumer would reasonably expect it to be so. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission polices that piece of legislation and takes legal action where necessary, subject to their resources. In 2008, they conducted some studies following a government-sponsored survey that showed widespread problems in our marketplace and actually took some action. And then they asked us to develop a standard along with the Department of Agriculture, which we did. Since that standard came into place earlier this year, our Consumer Commission has with industry funding, had some surveillance happening on a quarterly basis, random sampling of the retail sector, and I know is about to take some action. But a bigger problem for us is the food service sector, and I think that's a major problem everywhere. It was alluded to today, and I'm pleased to say that Australian Customs is starting to having a look at doing some policing on the border using this standard. So it's kind of a global problem, and there are some global things happening. You would do well also to look north to the Canadian Food Inspection Service that has been monitoring olive oil for a long time and finds a range of issues and does take action and does fine and does publicise the names of those who do it. Of course, alongside all this science and technology and development of standards, there is also the PR and political aspect of this problem. In Australia, we had strong resistance from our major retailers to this whole process, and they acknowledged it was because they didn't want to change and they didn't want the cost of changing. And one of the things they didn't want to change was the selling of oil labelled pure, light and extra light. This standard specifically prohibits that, because our consumer research along the way indicated that consumers think extra light is low-fat olive oil, when in fact the reverse is quite true. I'm pleased to say that in the last few months both major retailers have agreed that their home brand or their private label product will comply, and I know they are testing, and that brings me to my final point. It's all very well to say, you know, and I work with the importers in Australia too. They have sampled stuff and sent it off to Europe to be verified and had it all come back with a big tick, stuff that they know should not get a tick. It comes down to, in fact, somebody in government in Australia or the USA or in Canada or Germany taking the bit between the teeth, funding some good research, trusting their own science. And you have the American Oil Chemists Society here, the most respected fats and oils body in the world, in my view. I wish we had them in Australia. trusting your own science, trusting your own scientists, and cleaning up the marketplace. You don't have to test everything. When government acts, it's in the fortunate position that it can publicise what it's doing. That is the principle on which the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission acts. It makes its findings public. That makes everyone in the trade nervous, and they start to lift their game. That's what needs to happen here. You have to get out there, do some surveillance, do some prosecution, make it known that on a random basis, periodically, stuff is going to be taken off the shelf, both domestic and imported. Stuff is going to be checked at the border for food service, and that will change the market in the USA, and dare I say it, change the worldview of this market. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Miller. I have a number of questions, but Senator? All right. I want to go back to Mr. Bauer. I have a number of questions to ask you. I was curious of your criticism of a federal marketing order. Does that mean that you would not be willing to adhere to such standards or require your importers to adhere to such standards if there were a marketing order issued?
Not at all, because our members already have to adhere to those standards. The bigger issue with a marketing order is that every lot gets inspected. And you're not talking about a small product volume. And it would be the same for domestic producers. At least, again, this is my understanding based on what I've seen in other marketing orders. So you're adding a significant cost and delays in the system. And as was mentioned today, olive oil doesn't get any better when there's delays. And I've heard delays of at least a month regarding inspection and communication between USDA and FDA regarding releasing product that was inspected. So the marketing order would facilitate those type of delays, which is something that would be bad for the entire category.
Mr. Miller, do you have a comment on that as to delays, or I should probably ask Adam about that. Adam, you want to come back?
Sure.
Talk about marketing orders for a moment? What is the issue of delay? Is that, in your view, a serious issue?
In terms of the implementation of the order? As I understand the process, again, there are attorneys that we've engaged to guide us through this based on a lot of experience with other orders, Rice Commission, Walnut Board. A draft must be prepared based on a consensus of California growers and is then submitted to the USDA for approval. Following approval of the USDA on the language of the order and its compliance with precedent and the marketing order legislation, the order is then put to a vote of the growers, and it requires a 2/3 majority of growers by number or 2/3 of growers by volume, at which point, if the order is passed, it would become federal law. So the delay is primarily in the USDA's adoption of and approval of the order. Bringing it to a vote, I think given the support we have from other organizations within the state and the existence of most of these lists and grower databases, bringing a draft together, I think, will be a fairly speedy process. I think the delay will be mainly in the USDA on how long they drag their feet to approve the draft. The greater challenge will be to then apply for the 8E order, which would then apply those standards to the imported products as well. That is a process that I'm not as familiar with. I think in the interim, it would be very effective to have closer scrutiny put on the California standard for product that is traded in California through local prosecution at the state level and district, because that is a law in California, as well as have the USDA look further into enforcement of the existing grade standards nationally prior to the completion of a new marketing order and standard that is created.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bauer, you talked about having notified state agencies and having gotten no response. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, and I'll talk specifically about California. We've done it in other states as well. Once the standard was in place, anytime we've found an oil that was, we refer to it as grossly adulterated, so that there can be no doubt what it was. It's not something that just misses the standard, because then that's hard to there could be some disagreement as to whether or not that's easy enough to take action against. But this is somebody putting something else in there.
But this was not California.
It wasn't California.
It wasn't California. I would like more information about that.
Yeah, and I can provide you with copies of letters that we've sent to the agency. There were at least 2 companies in California who, over the years, we have notified the State Attorney General about several times. In addition to FDA, we notify FDA on the national level and on the district level where we bought the product, and a few offices within FDA. But since California has a law in place now, it can take action, or any state seems to be able to take action much easier and much more efficiently than the federal government can, just because of size. So we really think, and speaking with Tom Mueller a while back, and he mentioned today, if you get 1 or 2 hits on something like that is so easy to prove, that message just goes nationwide, because people are going to realize, and people can't pick and choose where they're sending their product, which is why we are contacting other states too, trying to get more and more states to adopt standards of identity for olive oil, because then it gets hard. What can they ship here and there? So, but initially, and I'm sure any speaker that already spoke today would probably agree, it's again, a low-hanging fruit that's out there that everybody knows who they are, and we've all probably told the state who they are. If we can get some action on that, well, that could go a long way.
I'm a bit curious, just a clarification of point. If I heard you correctly earlier, it was in defense of the NOAA's testing regimen has ensured that 99% of the oil does in fact meet the existing standard. And if I hear you correctly in your last sentence, was that you are only pursuing action on the most egregious offenders. That seems to me like a little bit of a conflict there in statement.
No, it's not true. My point was that the easiest action to take, the swiftest action, the least costly action for a state or a federal government to take, would be against the ones where it is so blatant and so easy to prove out there.
So to paraphrase that, the position of the NOAA is only to take action on the most egregious.
Absolutely not. We notify the government of every issue.
Every issue that's in conflict with what you mentioned earlier. So every issue?
It's not in conflict.
Every issue, just the most egregious ones?
Particularly the most egregious one. Just about, if something is very close to standard, the government's not going to take action against it. And the cost to try to defend any action that the government would take, they're not going to want to take action against it. Yet we still notify them when there's an issue. When there's a blatant adulteration that takes place, we aggressively go after as many government agencies as possible. We try to sit down with them, particularly on a state level. We've done that, and try to get them to take action against these companies.
Mr. Bauer, do you have a website that publicizes all of these enforcement actions that you're initiating?
No, we don't do it publicly. We go through the government agencies because we believe it's their responsibility to take action against them.
I will agree with Mr. Englehardt. The sum and substance of your testimony was that most things were fine.
Just a quick question.
Okay.
Go ahead. There was a group, the group that was here before made the statement that they felt that almost 75% of this stuff was under quality. Are you refuting that number?
Yes, because that was based on these 2 tests that were not accepted, they were rejected by the International Organization of the world's olive oil experts. So they were rejected as being unreliable. So they were based primarily on those 2 rejected tests and a taste test, which no matter how you break it down, and we've done our own, sent samples out places and had them do taste analysis, and the panels come back with different replies because there's a degree of subjectivity whenever you do a taste test.
Could we have Mr. Miller address the sum and substance of the test issue?
Yeah. Starting with the chemistry, and in particular 2 tests that the International Olive Council has rejected, although I know they are certainly still in discussion about those at their panel of expert chemists. I come back to what I said, American Oil Chemists Society and the International Standards Organization are fine with those tests. They're very effective at detecting low-grade oils and very effective at detecting soft refined oils blended in with extra virgin, which is where a lot of the problem lies. In Australia, it was government that examined that issue, government that examined those data points. It was the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry chemists who examined all that methodology and looked at all that data point and was quite satisfied that that was fine to work. And I'll come back to what I said before on that and go a little further. In Germany, when that started to be applied by the government, and in my view, the Germans have the best of fats and oils chemists in the world, initially it caused a fair bit of activity and publicity and controversy in the marketplace, but ultimately the major retailers saw fit to say, we're going to apply this as our internal standard, and they use this chemistry 3 or 4 times a year to monitor the progress of extra virgin olive oils in that marketplace and in neighbouring countries. So it's not good enough to say these have been rejected by the International Olive Council when you have ISO, American Oil Chemist Society, and major retailers adopting this in Germany and now in Australia. So it has been, in my view, rigorously examined and is certainly subject to discussion at the IOC, and you would do well to ask the American Oil Chemist Society about this too. Getting to the tasting of olive oil, certainly it is to some degree subjective, but it is a scientific process. There are statistics involved, and sensory analysis is something that is conducted by whole departments at universities across this country of all types of foods. So I reject any thought that it doesn't have significant value. Certainly you can get to marginal points of difference, but obvious things like rancidity and significant rancidity, the vast majority of taste panels will get that. The good news is that this advanced chemistry follows along quite nicely beside the taste test, so a combination of the taste test, these particular tests altogether, in fact, can describe the life of olive oil well before it fails a test. The methodology actually is becoming really, really good, and I'm hopeful that one day soon the retail sector in particular will take this up as a way of monitoring what's in its shelves. That is the ultimate outcome. On behalf of its consumers, it feels obliged to do that, and that has certainly been the experience in Northern Europe and in fact in the UK increasingly.
My colleagues, do you have some questions? Anything?
No, just I'm going to have to leave, Madam Chairman, but I would like to make a comment on marketing orders. That Mr. Bauer, you don't think it's needed? Marketing orders in the olive industry?
As we said, I think it's excessive. I think there are better ways to handle that as opposed to adding those.
You know, marketing orders are always controversial, and we've got them in the grape industry. We've got them in the almond industry. The federal marketing order in the almond industry, as controversial as it was, has been a tremendous asset to that industry, and it has boomed globally because of it. So I think this is probably where we're heading. It's probably going to be a good thing for this industry, to come together and come together and within themselves and to do something to move this olive industry forward in the future. And as I got to go, I just wish you the best. Thanks everybody for coming, and appreciate everybody's input.
Thank you, Senator, for being here. Senator LaMalfa, did you wish to?
I'll follow on that. I'll follow on that point too. I think Mr. Bauer, you mentioned in your opinion on the marketing orders that because they would require extensive testing, like every lot. Was that the main beef you had with the concept, or is that a process that could be altered a little bit so it? Again, I think we're trying to find a float level here of what is comfortable for the growers on the amount of testing or the cost of that, or that sort of thing. We want everybody to be comfortable with it because we want the thing to work.
Yeah.
So why couldn't we find, just because it says marketing order doesn't mean test every vat, test every lot? Is that correct?
It's my understanding that the marketing order law requires every lot to be tested. And another problem.
We define lot in different ways then.
Well, you could, but Basically, I know on the import side, it's at least every import shipment. Now, the importer could choose to divide that shipment into various lots. I've seen that done in some other products, because then if one aspect is held up, you're not holding up an entire container or something like that. But another big issue there is, again, we don't accept these new tests yet. They show a lot of promise, and Paul Miller knows a lot more about the chemistry than I do. He's an expert in this area. I just need the rest of the world's experts to agree with him, and so far they haven't. Now they're looking at it again, and we've asked them. We've commended them for doing that, and we had asked them prior to when they started doing it to look at these tests, and they are. We did the same thing with the panel testing. That is not part of the IOC's ongoing testing when it does its program. We asked that it be included, and right now it's in a pilot phase where it is being included. Because again, as I mentioned, to make an economic judgment on something that has a degree of subjectivity could be problematic. And going forward with a marketing order or any other type of requirement here in the United States, we were told in some states that absolutely we won't even consider putting anything in place that has that in there, because it's going to cost us more money to try to defend that action than we're going to get in return for it and the benefit for it. So, our issues are, yes, as far as our understanding, it has to be every lot, and we don't agree yet with the testing.
And I guess that would be something we'd have to explore if the idea of a marketing order is something that's very important to make all this work. But and certainly with your input and getting everybody at the table, testing subjectivity, taste subjectivity is maybe a bit of an art, but if that's applicable to the wine industry as well, and they have a good workable solution, maybe we can emulate a lot of what wine does and some others to reach that. You don't want to be too subjective, but you want to be able to take some of the art aspects of this and have it in there if you can get a pretty good consensus. Does that seem agreeable?
Well, it does, and as Mr. Miller mentioned, the new test, if they do get recognized by the IOC, that correlate with what the taste panels find. So, yeah, and the IOC also has a fairly new test to detect some of the issues that these tests also do. So, in some sort of combination, it could very well work.
Can I just make another point about the chemistry that may clarify this for you? And I reiterate, probably don't need to, that these are ISO and AOCS accepted, but anyway, we'll put that to one side. The fact is that when an oil is freshly made and it's in really tip-top condition, to give you an example, one of the tests, it starts off with a level of 95 out of 100. After 2 years in Australia, it's still over the minimum accepted standard, a good oil. So we're not talking about much of a bar here in terms of making the grade. And that would encompass all extra virgin. So it actually describes, if you want to, the life of the oil, and at the end of that time, by the time it fails that test, even marginally, it's pretty tired, gone oil. So it's not like we're saying, everything has to be exactly this and a slight variation is a problem. There is a lot of scope within what's being proposed for the marketing order and what now has been adopted in Australia for good oil over about a 2-year period. Now, personally, as a producer, I want my oil consumed within 2 years, I've got to tell you. Because if it doesn't, I've got a problem. I haven't sold it yet, or it hasn't been sold in the end. So it's not like this is overly restrictive. This stuff is being used in retail, and it is on that basis that oil starts really good and has a life. And so we're setting quite a, I think, conservative and reasonable kind of bar in terms of a minimum acceptable quality, and that's what we're talking about here.
May I ask if Mr. Englehardt has did you have a thought on that too?
Yes, I think much of Mr. Bauer's response, I think his logic path is not quite correct in that he is confusing the methodology of implementation with the necessity for changing the problem. So one of the nice aspects of marketing orders is they are drafted by the body that is proposing the marketing order. That would then require USDA approval, but there's much flexibility in terms of how that order is to be implemented at a final level. So I think it's important to not totally forego the marketing order itself based on his assumption of how that methodology is going to be used. So in terms of the standard being enforced is not defined, and I would refute that Mr. Bauer's understanding of that process, and he is using the logic that it will be too arduous to sample every lot. At the same time, using that same logic that method is too arduous to refute the whole marketing order concept. I think it's important to step back and look at the end goal, which is to cause the enforcement of a standard, and one would hope a standard that is updated to reflect some of the modern science. And marketing order is just one of the possible methods to reach that point. And as I stated earlier, my opinion is that it is the best option that we have, and it is legislation that is unique to United States growers of other places in the world. And I think the precedent is there that the U.S. has adopted standards different from other areas of the world that were once production centers for other crops. The pistachio standard comes to mind. The almond standard, the grades of trade used in almonds, are different than the grades of trade that were once used in Spain, which as recently as 15 years ago was a lead production in the world, which we have quite neatly surpassed here in the recent years. Wine grape standards and certifications for grades of trade in the U.S. are much different than those that are used in the EU. So there is a lot of precedent for an emerging industry in America to essentially refine and redefine the standards by which we hold ourselves. And I think, again, the actual exact methodology by which that's carried out can be worked on.
And I think that's a very good close to our hearing and to this panel. I want to thank all of you, both of you, for coming today. And I want to just close by, first of all, thanking everyone, of course, but I want to tell you that the Olive Oil Subcommittee is looking at how we proceed with respect to policy, how we proceed supporting federal efforts, but also what we can do here in the state with respect to supporting and advancing good olive oil production, authenticity issues, quality issues, enforcement. Of course, we've heard a lot about that today, the marketing order, the need to educate the consumer. We need to do that. We have our subcommittee has a very fine advisory committee, and many of the panelists belong to it, but there are some others who are here as well that I want to acknowledge. Alexandra Devereen, Lillian Dixon is also here, Deborah Rogers, and other members, Dan Flynn, of course, Jim Etters, Brendon Flynn, Brady Whitlow, Darrell Cordy, and Mike Bradley have agreed to serve, and we will be working with them as well as consumers, producers, retailers to figure out what the next steps are. We have now public comment. This is a public hearing, so it's a time when I will excuse the panelists. Anyone in the audience who is so moved to address the subcommittee and has anything to say, I would appreciate it. I'm going to put somebody on the spot. Mr. Cordy, I know I didn't ask you to speak. I know you're in the audience, but I thought you might, if so moved, want to speak to the issue of sensory testing that was raised. I think you're uniquely qualified, I believe, in the audience to talk about the value of such, or the reliability of such testing. And I'm glad you're willing to come forward. Welcome. And anyone else, public comment is a time anyone is willing to, who would like to mention anything, come forward, is welcome to do so. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I really don't like talking without a script. However, I found some of the comments today very interesting about tasting, only because of the fact that in the International Olive Oil Council's description of what extra virgin olive oil is, it has to be without a defect. The only way we can determine if the oil has a defect or not is by tasting it, because so far we have very limited use of a tasting machine. And that's why the International Olive Oil Council is also the people who guarantee the technical ability of a taste panel, because they're the ones who set the rules, they're the ones who do the testing, and if the panel doesn't match the test, well, the panel is disqualified. So this is a very important part of oil production, because the oil science part, as we've seen today in most of the testimony, you can actually change some of the chemistry very easily. What you can't do is change the way it tastes. And since I'm the chairman of the Los Angeles competition, I tend to hire as tasters that are the major tasters in their respective countries. So we have Spanish experts, Italian experts, Australian experts, New Zealand experts. Because originally my idea was to actually get them to taste California oil so that we would improve the breed. Well, what that's done is it's actually given us the opportunity to see different kinds of tasting. And this year the Los Angeles competition is divided into two hemispheres, Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere. People from the Southern Hemisphere will taste oil from the Northern Hemisphere and vice versa. But the quality of the taster is what's very important, because you have to have a taster who is competent. A machine cannot do it yet. I mean, once they've become practiced at doing this, they may in fact invent a machine that can tell you right away whether an oil is rancid. You then would eliminate tasting the oil, because if the machine says it's rancid, why taste it? It saves a lot of bad tastes in your mouth when you taste oil.
I was going to ask you how likely it is to find a machine that's going to be able to do that.
They already have the prototype for it.
I do. All right.
But it does only rancidity. And since that's the major problem, there are other analogous problems that you can discover by tasting, but these machines cost money. Doing the tests costs money. And, unless there's a monetary resolution to the whole thing, no one likes to spend money uselessly.
I want to thank you for letting me put you on the spot. I appreciate that. Public testimony, come forward. Please identify yourself and have a seat at the mic. Yes.
Yes, my name is Dennis Garrison, and I'm a table olive grower.
Welcome.
And I basically came to find out what was going on here, and I found that we could have had this meeting, and we have very similar situations and problems. We came from, our industry is basically a $100 million farm gate with about 1,400 growers, about 28,000 acres, the same as what you've heard from the olive oil people. Unfortunately, we're coming from 40 down to 28. And I was back in Washington, D.C., and testified before the ITC back in the early 2000s about the subsidies that you've heard expressed here today. And at that time, they were about $2 billion, and today, they're probably close to double that. And we're affected by the same kinds of problems, the flavor standards. I heard Adam talking about AD, and we're governed by the same thing. We are a marketing order. In fact, I'm the vice chairman of the California Olive Committee and the chairman of the research committee, part of that federal marketing order. The key to that, in my opinion, is going to be to make sure that the standard we're governed by is reasonably good flavor. My gosh, that's a slippery slope. And we're working very close with UC Davis to try to get a better definition of that. So I think that I'm here to basically say that certainly support, and we're certainly empathetic to what the olive oil industry is doing. I'm from Orland, California specifically. The synergies that we find between the two industries are becoming more and more each day. So.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Any other public testimony? Please come forward. No? I think I saw you before.
Yes, you did, Senator.
You don't get much time.
I won't. I just wanted to clarify one thing that I think is important. The UC Davis study was a very disciplined, rigorous study by a very well-established institution. And they applied the IOC standard to the oils that they tested, which included the taste panel, an IOC certified taste panel. So I just want to clarify, Mr. Bauer is trying to discredit that test, saying that it was based on chemistry that is not recognized by the IOC. Well, that's fine. Those tests weren't recognized by the IOC, but the taste panel test is and was conducted by an IOC certified panel. And the 73% of the supermarket oils failed the taste panel. And as Mr. Cordy just clarified, taste panels are very rigorous institutions. So I just wanted to make sure we understand, and I'm standing behind the rigors of the UC Davis test.
Indeed.
All right?
Thank you, Mr. Rillo. Further public comment? Come forward.
Hello, I'm John Pedal, Julia Grows Olive Oil in Dixon, California.
Welcome.
The people that you heard speak today are the big growers. I'm an artisan grower. The problem that I face is amplified. So, when you're talking to these people who can fight the business with the economies of scales, I appreciate that. They're doing me a great favor and helpful. But as a small family farm, I'm beat by that economies of scales, and it's even hampered more when I'm trying to fight these adulterated products that are coming into our country. So, anything that you could do to help the industry, help me as a grower, would be wonderful. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We have artisan producers on our Olive Oil Advisory Committee for precisely that reason. These are issues that affect everyone, and we look forward to working with everyone to come forward with our next proposals. So any other public comment? Just come forward. Welcome.
I represent the consumer. And I wondered if there's a clarification on the Buy America list. Over the week, there seems to be some confusion whether or not extra virgin olive oil is on the Buy America list. I think it was discussed briefly, and somebody indicated that not only is it not on the Buy America list, but it may have been excluded, and it'd be helpful, I think, to get some clarification of that.
All right, a good point. We'll look into that. Thank you. Further public comment? All right. Well, I would like to thank everyone for coming. Our panelists, I believe, were excellent, and thanks to the public for coming as well, and wish you all good eating with good olive oil. Thanks.